Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brighton Area Schools Board of Education meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, roll call, please. Ms. Ackermite.
Mr. Trombley. Here. Mr. Storm.
Present.
Mr. Conley.
Here.
Mrs. Marks.
Here.
Dr. Krebs.
Here.
Ms. Reed.
Here.
Mr. Myers.
Here. All right, that moves us to the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Support.
Moved by Ms. Reed, supported by Dr. Krebs. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 7-0. That moves us to the superintendent report. Dr. Elwha.
All right. We have 4 items under the superintendent report today. We're going to talk about science, technology, vocational equipment, Title IX, and then we're going to have Mr. Jones is going to be doing overview, a presentation on the budget amendment. But before we do that, if I could, on Friday of last week, we had the announcement of retirement of high school principal Gavin Johnson. I was principal at Brighton High School for 13 and a half years and led the school through a lot of challenging times, really poured his heart and soul into the school. And I just wanted to recognize him for his service to the district and really wish him well in the future. So he will be missed. So sticking with our high school theme, I'm really excited about some of the things that we have been working on. We have been working on our science classrooms. We've been talking about the science classrooms of the future, and the board knows that we've been having conversation, and we're looking at particularly room C8 at the high school as a potential model classroom where we're looking at furniture and configuration of the room. We're doing some experimentation, but we have had some of our teachers that have been absolutely fantastic, been super helpful with this. Tonight, we get to talk about something that we are ready to put into action now. And we have some of our teachers here to talk about some of these investments in science technology that we really think are going to enhance instruction at the high school. So if I can invite forward 3 of our teachers, we have Phil Lundy, who's a physics teacher at the high school. We have Hannah Remstead, who is a biology teacher. And we have Elizabeth Crane, who is a chemistry teacher at the high school. And they're going to share some information about 3 areas. One is dealing with Chromebooks and how they're going to use those. Second one has to do with Animatage tablets, which they'll explain. And the third has to do with microscopes. And then also Mr. Castile, our technology directors, work closely with them, and he'll be able to answer questions also. All right, so our awesome teachers, take it away.
Hey guys. Dr. Outlaw asked us to kind of focus on a few of the things that we're looking at here. And so as we start off, we already have in the medical section and I always pronounce it wrong, Anatomage table, which is the full size. They can do dissections. They can look at all the parts of the anatomy. And for our anatomy classes, we've requested some of these tablets. And so we have a short, like a minute and a half, if I can have your time to describe the Anatomage. Anatomage. I've been practicing it for like 20 minutes.
The anatomy tablets.
Yeah, those. I can pronounce that. All right. So we'll just take about a minute and a half of your time. It's not the whole video, but it's nice. If there was sound, hang on.
Didn't it just work?
Yeah, it just worked. Yeah, just a minute ago. It's okay. I'll make sure I got
There's a jiggle here.
Sorry, guys.
Maybe
See if
pop
I
that
got
out
it.
and replug it.
Yeah, we can try that.
There we go.
All good?
Should be good. It's going to pop up in a second.
All right, sweet.
All right, there you go.
All right, let's try this again.
Look at it.
All right.
Of life is now possible. In its 10th iteration, Anatomage table the next level with refined technology and the highest level of
nerves.
accuracy. Learners can now visualize real anatomical details with unparalleled resolution across the anatomage bodies, 3D cadavers derived from actual human bodies. Students and professionals can immerse themselves in the first fully interactive 3D birth simulation featuring real human anatomy brought to life. With Table 10's birth simulation, learners can visualize the anatomical transformation taking place inside a pregnant body during the different stages of labor, including cervical dilation, infant rotation and movements, and the release of the placenta in full 3D from any angle. In Table 10, learners can also explore the impact of time and disease on an aging body. Our newest anatomage body, Hans, was a real-life individual with lung cancer who passed away at age 70. Hans offers real-world insight into various conditions, including tumors in the chest, pancreas, and liver. Table 10 not only offers a
All right, so just a little insight into how it works. Just a small tablet size, it does that. And it shows, you can quiz on it, you can have the kids look at different images and have to answer on it. And it ties in with a lot of the stuff for anatomy. Elizabeth has a little note from our anatomy teacher about it.
Yes, I think specific to the anatomy courses, the teachers are hoping to use it to help the kids practice organ identification, bone and muscle, names, and location identification. Normally a cadaver lab obviously is not something that a student can experience at the high school level, that's at the college level, but the simulation would allow them to take some of that learning and be better prepared when they get to a higher level physiology course in college. And then
And in addition to anatomy classes, I also teach forensic science, and there's a whole anthropology autopsy section that would also we'd be able to use for that as well. So not just anatomy, but forensics too.
And they have victims of violent crime as well in here, in which they have scanned the bodies, and there's gunshot wounds and things like that, which match what Hannah's looking for as well.
And then it would also, in the anatomy course, they do a dissection. And so it would help to prepare the students so that they could get more out of the real life dissection, because they would have more of an idea of what they were looking for and more practice going into it. So I think it'd be great.
Yes.
So are these tables any different than the ones that we have now?
They're a portable in-class version for a different set of classes.
So it's not the full-size table?
It is not full-size table. If you
Just
can
tablets.
see the girl working on the tablet here in the screen, and so they're just small tablets
I see.
which function in the same manner with the same databases that you can use, but it's not the full-size human as it is in the other classroom.
So is the software then, I guess, compared to what we have now, I mean, it's the same brand, isn't it?
Yep, same company and same brand software, so it's as deep as that, and you can bring in updates on the software as it's going through with different things. Plus, they'll bring different bodies in as well.
So do we have to then update? I guess if we got an update with these, would that go to the table as well that we already have?
If it would be like any other type of update device, then we should be able to run with what we have. And then at some point in the future, if you wish to update the entire system, I believe you can, but I believe you can run with the data that's on the system.
Because we already have a subscription with these people, don't we, Jim?
Yeah, Nick, would that something we can tie in?
It would be the same, it would probably be different licensing than what we have with the regular tables. So you would have the software that's available with that table
Compared to the tablets?
compared to your tablets. Yeah.
I see.
But you would still get, I would assume they would still use those same current upgrades. So they would release all those same upgrades at the same time, and then we would just apply those upgrades to the tablets.
Okay.
And they're free upgrades. They are free upgrades. Oh, I think, yeah, they're free.
Oh,
I
okay.
did check and verify.
Okay.
Question I had, as it relates to the difference between the tablet versus the full size that are used in the Health Ox Lab, is there a particular reason why you prefer the tablet over the larger version?
Well, we can bring it back to our science classrooms instead of having to transport our whole class into the health.
No, I guess what I was getting at is purchasing an actual full size.
Oh,
system for your class in addition to keeping the one that's in the Health Ox Lab? I understand they're expensive, but many have heard at board meetings, my own daughter has benefited from this and greatly. And it's really affected her learning in a very positive way. And I'd like to just advocate for providing you with whatever you need to help bring this into a classroom in the best possible way we can here in Brighton.
I think with like anatomy and at least in my forensics classes as well, if there's a larger table, like some kids can kind of hang out in the background and not be as hands-on with it. Whereas if we're providing them with more individualized tablets, everyone's doing what they've got to do at the same time, and it allows everyone to participate a little bit more easily.
Well, and I was going to say that having this and the large one in the STEAM Center would provide some versatility because so I teach right next door to Brielle Hopton. So I've talked to her about strategies for managing when she's evaluating students on the large table because she's pulling up like small groups of students at a time. So it's manageable, but you have to plan to do that at a time when other students have a more independent project that they can be working on or whatnot. And so I could even imagine a situation where if the science department has this, Health Oc might even occasionally want to bring those smaller tablets in because with these smaller tablets, you can push a quiz out to all of the students at the same time, and they're all pulling it up on their own tablet. And so you don't have to bring group by group up to the table.
And as you see from the tablet, it's the same exact software, same exact images, just on a smaller scale. So you wouldn't get them human size, but you can zoom into any piece, any organ, any bone that you're looking for.
Very nice.
Yeah, they're really sweet. They really are.
You want to talk about the other two
Yep.
pieces real quick?
Yep. So we were looking at Chrome cards.
Before, you,
I did have a
Oh,
question.
I apologize.
I couldn't remember from our presentation on the big board, but I vaguely recalled that there were studies on animals that would assist in the biology department, or is my memory faulty there?
I wouldn't be surprised if there are. I'm not sure
Okay.
myself, but if there are, that would be.
Yeah, I haven't
Okay.
dove that deep into it for biology, but I can't imagine them not doing it. It's such a sweet system that I can imagine them having the same type of devices, the cats and the mice and the earthworms and all the other things that we would do with them.
On the big table, we have 4.
You have 4 animals?
Yeah.
So it would be
Okay.
the same software, so yeah. You know which ones they are?
I know there's a dog.
Dogs.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Chromebooks to support the technology that we have. It supports the LabQuest that you'll see in a few moments. Supports the new microscopes we're looking at. Supports our software. All our textbooks are going digital. At the moment, we have 4 Chromebooks for 12 classrooms.
For
And
Chrome cards.
4 Chrome cards for 12 classrooms. Thank you. And so we're looking to expand that because we are filling up as we speak, trying to use it for all our software. And then as our new books, textbooks come in, we're going OpenStax next year, it looks like, for AP Physics. And it's an online textbook, way cheaper compared to purchasing textbooks, but they're online, and so we would use that in between. So I know a lot of the classrooms are doing that.
Just a quick question regarding the online textbooks. Clearly, when you buy a physical paper copy, that book can be used indefinitely until it's replaced and you don't pay a fee to use it. I'm assuming with the digital textbooks, is there an annual fee we'll pay?
Actually, OpenStax is free.
Super.
So the only thing you would pay for is if you wanted, I would assume you would have a few kids via IEPs or 504s and things like that that would require a hands textbook. And I think they're about $65. I purchased one just so I could take a look at it. But OpenStax it's got a lot of options, and they just opened up an AP 1 and 2. So that's the only reason I know about it.
Well, that's terrific.
Yeah, so it would be nice. I'll let you know at the end of the year how it worked. Cool. And then this is the LabQuest, which is a suite. We've started with the old LabQuest 2. We have some LabQuest 3s that we'd like to run through. And this is the digital suite. So the LabQuest is the center. It's a PDA type device. And then it registers. It has some onboard sensors, and then it has just a multiple of sensors, everything you can imagine from biology to physics to chemistry. And we have the set we're building up. Our old sensors fit the new LabQuest. And we're looking for, I think, 2 or 3 sets, 1 for the new classroom, and then 2 to upgrade from our previous set. So I believe it's 3. It's been a bit since I talked to Nick about it, but They're bulletproof, the new ones. They've been outstanding. We use them all the time within our labs. They really are nice.
Okay, so these look like the old CBRs, the Rangers. Is that what they kind of are? But
On steroids type thing.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's what I
they've
was-
been, the old CBRs for the calculators,
Mhm.
and the same group moved into the LabQuest 1 and 2, and now the 3 performs functions on the data, and I mean, I use it for all kinds of movement labs and, different types of stuff.
And also the data that you collect on the LabQuest can be transferred to like our Chromebook. And so you
Yeah.
can do data manipulation on the Chromebook as well once you collect the data on the LabQuest.
thank you.
And then you can graph that data and work the data out and try to pick up pieces from the data that you pushed from the LabQuest. And then the last bit is the microscopes that we looked at. This is one of the examples that Nick was looking at. Nick's got all the information on the scopes. But they can also be digital. You have a tablet along with it. It can be, shared in groups. One of the things we do when we're looking at the scopes is, you have one person looking and the partners aren't really picking up what's going on. So what's nice with this is the people looking, you can then display it. You can push it to one of the televisions around the room. So if some kid finds something really cool, like last year, we found some tardigrades that we hadn't seen before. And so we pushed it out. The kids are taking pictures with their phones. But with this, you can push it out and push it in the classroom so people can see it. And the Chromebooks and everything else.
So these are there's 3 purchases that would come up for a vote on the February 12th meeting. Would you like us to go through the bids? I can pull them up here on the screen if you would like, or we can do that on the 12th. What's your preference from the board side?
I just have a quick question. Is any of this equipment slated for the bridge?
This is specific to the high school. Yes, this
So
is
is there
specific.
any, like, as far as the procurement is concerned, though, is any, like, for example, you recall the meetings last year where we talked about microscopes for the bridge? Will any of these microscopes be made available to bridge students?
So we haven't talked to the bridge yet, but I think it's a great idea to talk to them.
Okay.
What's the, I guess, what are we looking at cost-wise on this stuff?
I'm going to pull these up. Just, Nick, do you have them? Do you want to walk through these?
I can, yeah.
Okay, do you want me to,
I mean, we don't have to go through each individual bid. I'm just trying to
do you
get
want
an
to just
idea of
explain how much they
overall
are?
cost.
Kind of,
So for 80 of the microscopes, one of the 80 microscopes, one that we're recommending here is $76,500. Okay, those 80 of them.
Okay.
For the 6 Chromebook carts, it's going to be $61,709. And then for the Anatomitage. $81,500. And that's for.
I like the anatomy.
And that is,
oh, is there not?
81.
34 of them,
So it's 2 classroom sets.
2 classroom sets.
And then would just like one science room have the 30 of them there? So if the other science rooms wanted other ones, then we'd end up purchasing more.
No, we would move them around in carts like we do with the Chromebooks right now. So they'll be in their own designated cart, and as the classes move back and forth, we would move them to whoever needs them. They've been pretty safe in that with our computers.
Okay.
And the same thing with the scopes. The scopes will be there in their own protected mobile cases that we looked at. Yeah. So they'll charge you to do everything, and what's nice is you can push them on. Like right now, we just sort of carry them all over with the older scopes, and so this will be nice that we can have them all set. Let's see, Mr. Town.
So in the scope of the class, how many sections do you think these will be involved in when you look at the microscopes to the Hermitage tables to the?
Well, the microscopes are in every bio class, so we'll say.
Every bio class, AP bio, I use them in forensics.
So they'll all have.
Yeah, they're all over the place
So they'll
across
update,
it.
they'll update all the science rooms and that's enough to do all of them.
Yeah, for right now, that's more than, I think it's another set beyond what we have in place now, I believe.
I think so
Yeah.
too.
So it's a full set more than that. We looked at one full set for the new classroom as the demonstration room, and then we have, which we can borrow, obviously. And then the other sets will replace the sets, the older scopes that we've had for quite a while.
Just out of curiosity, is there a plan for what the older versions that these will replace?
These replaced, not at the moment. We had talked about taking them and sort of parting them out and getting a nice 1 or 2 sets that we can keep back. Because we can make, they're pretty much the same, so we can make a good, set out of them and then use those as well, as a backup.
And then where would the money be coming from?
So this would be a general fund expenditure.
Okay.
Okay. All right. As these folks leave, I just want to sing their praises. I'm telling you that we've been trying to think about something that doesn't exist yet, and think about the science classrooms of the future. And the 3 people here and a couple others have really been calling people all over the country and doing research and meeting with all of us. And I just want to say thank you to all 3 of you and everybody else who's been helping. We really appreciate your leadership on this project.
Yeah, thanks for you guys too. I mean, the thought of it is pretty cool. We're very excited about it. Because some of the ideas we wanted for our rooms, as they change, we get to practice. And if it's terrible, we don't have to do it. So we're kind of working on that. And if it's great, we'll all do it. So it's sweet. So, but thank you
We're
guys for your
excited
time,
about
too.
So before you sit down, just maybe a parting comment. I've spoken to a number of my peers on the school board, and to echo Dr. Outlaw's sentiment, we really appreciate what you're doing in the classroom. Whatever we can do to create the best learning environment possible in Brighton, please encourage your peers to come back to the school board and share those ideas with us. We welcome the opportunity to help you have cutting edge equipment, classrooms, and learning opportunities for our kids. So we appreciate the fact that you're bringing these ideas to us and giving us an opportunity to support you.
Thanks so much. We'll do that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, another fun, very student-driven project here. Dr. Dargag is going to come forward and talk about the 61C dollars and a piece of equipment that we're going to bring before the board. Will be paid for out of grant dollars.
Thank you, Dr. Well, good evening. A year ago, I went through all the nuances to CTE funding at the state level. I'm not going to do that again. As Dr. Outlaw said, we're just going to concentrate at 61C. That's money that's approved by the legislature every year. And fortunately, we have a very robust economy in Michigan again. So the legislature approved a significant amount of money that goes to the career education planning districts. And in our case, that's Livingston County. Last year, we received just short of $1 million. This year was just about the same amount. In total, last year we received $202,000. This year was $207,000. And there was one piece of equipment that goes beyond the threshold and requires Board of Education approval. And that's it's a PolyJet printer that Matt Jordan would like to have in his engineering program. And this is an industrial grade printer. The parts that will be produced with it, not only are there 5 color parts, but they can withstand mechanical strain on them, and they're solid materials as opposed to the flimsy ones that we're making now. And the parts will be produced at a much higher level of tolerances, which are critical. Some of the projects the students are working on now, the advanced projects, like they're making these miniature autonomous vehicles, and the parts have to be very exact. And the frustration for the students is with the current printers that they use, sometimes they have to make 2 and 3 different generations of parts to get them to fit properly. So with the 61C dollars, we'd like to purchase a PolyJet printer that it's the base price is $62,000. But for a $2,000 upgrade, they're going to take us to a $160,000 piece of equipment. The company we're working with, IST, Integrated Services Technology, which we do a lot of business with. Now, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. We have a great professional relationship with this company. I've had that relationship for years. And in exchange for getting these better deals, for example, we host probably 2 tours a month from different school districts, whether it's Catholic Central, Novi, we've got Troy coming in a couple of weeks, and we spend like a day with them talking about STEAM education and curriculum. And in addition to that, Matt Jordan, he also writes curriculum for IST, which they package with their equipment that they sell at the school districts. So they're getting a good deal. They give us good deals. We get preferential treatment as far as if there's something that needs to be calibrated there's a malfunction with a piece of equipment, they're here within 24 hours. Because we've actually basically established a showroom for their company. And they appreciate that. They take care of us. We take care of them. So that's the deal. So for $2,000 additional, we went from a J35 printer to a J55, which is, like I say, it's an industrial grade, $160,000 piece of equipment. But you do need some accessory items. So we are going to purchase the extended warranty. It comes with a 1-year warranty. We're going to go 2 more years beyond that. That was $5,600. $5,000 worth of consumable materials, which will last for years. But then Matt wouldn't have to take that out of $61,800. An air extractor was $33,000 and a water jet system for $3,500. So the total package that we would ask the board to approve with all the accessory items, the actual piece of equipment comes out to $85,000. And in actuality, like I said, that they're giving it to us for $64,000, just the piece of equipment, when it's a $160,000 item. So, do you have any questions? This is going to be state of the art.
Where is this going to be put?
It's upstairs in the makerspace.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In the maker space upstairs.
Yeah. Not in Matt Jordan's classroom space, the adjoining room.
In the lab?
Yeah, in the lab where it's got the CNC equipment and laser
So
cutter.
there's enough room in there for it?
Yeah. Yeah. He's got a floor plan already drawn up. That's Matt.
Okay.
So
Yes.
here we've got a plan for using it in the engineering classes. Is this something that will be used for any other purpose? It sounds like it's too specific to really have much cross use, but I'm curious.
Well, the robotics team, they use everything that's up there. So that's the second immediate need. And then, for example, the drama department, they use a CNC router table. Graphics classes use a CNC router table. If there's any other department within the school building that needs to have a part printed, we can do it for them. And we have the scanning technology where we can scan it, print it, make it in a relatively short period of time.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you as well to Dr. Darga. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, and I'm going to turn it back to President Meyer to do Title IX update.
So as everyone is aware, we engaged a third-party auditor to conduct an evaluation of the Title IX cases that we had over a 1-year period. There were 3 different Title IX matters that were the subject of the audit. The auditor provided an analysis of each of the particular cases and did an overall assessment of each of the situations. There has been, as everyone is aware, there's been a closed session review with the auditor regarding those 3 separate cases as a result of obviously the confidential and sensitive nature of the information that was the subject of the audit. As a result of the audit that was completed, the board back in September and has been discussed in meetings since then, has requested that the auditor provide an executive summary or a management summary of the analysis that was conducted and the recommendations that the auditor was making in her professional experience for the district to incorporate, to provide for an account for best practices, changes in administrative guidelines and procedures. I received, and I've shared with all the board, that executive summary. It was received late last week. And for the benefit of the public, and that document is, as was requested by the board, that it be provided by the auditor, that it not be confidential and could be something that could be shared publicly, including the recommendations. So we did receive that non-privileged letter late last week. It provides the summary that we had requested. Among other things, the auditor confirmed that she found no evidence of intentional noncompliance with any the Title IX regulations. She did not find any actions that would warrant any disciplinary action against any BAS employee or administrator. And also recognizing that there are nonetheless improvements that can be made with respect to how all of the Title IX cases that come before us can be processed and handled. She made several recommendations which are incorporated into this letter. And so for the benefit of the public, I would like, and I asked Dr. Outlaw to prepare a slide presentation which sets forth all of the recommendations that were contained in the letter that we received from the auditor. And so it's my understanding that Dr. Outlaw has done that, and I would ask that he turn that
I
over.
just have a quick question. How did you make a recommendation to the superintendent to put a presentation together when we haven't even as a board discussed the finding? I haven't been to a single meeting and had a single conversation with anyone on the board regarding this letter. So what is the superintendent presenting when we as a board haven't even had a discussion?
All he's doing is he's taking verbatim what the recommendations are from the auditor. This isn't.
Wouldn't it be in the public's interest to hear our opinion before the superintendent? I don't disagree that this letter is written between you, who is a licensed attorney, bar attorney in the state of Michigan. You work directly with the attorney that wrote this letter. We as a board, we weren't involved in shaping the narrative in this letter. You were.
No, she's the auditor that I asked to provide an executive summary as was requested by the board. This was what, in particular you, Mr. Storm, hold on. No, let me finish. Let me finish. And I asked her to provide an executive summary of her findings and her recommendations that could then be shared publicly.
That's what I just
So
said.
that's what we're here to do. I asked, it wasn't even a recommendation. I asked Dr. Outlaw, for the benefit of whoever's here or may be watching, rather than having them, I mean, if somebody wants this letter, they can have it. But for purposes of going through it, which I thought is what you wanted to have, I had Dr. Outlaw prepare a slide so that each one of these recommendations could be shown on the screen. I mean,
You thought wrong, Roger.
well, it's not a matter of thinking. It's a matter of, look.
You said you just thought that's what I wanted, so I'm correcting the record. You thought wrong.
Okay.
So we as a board, we haven't even had a conversation at this board table regarding what is contained in this letter. And you, after securing a $1.4 million contract for the superintendent of our school district,
Well, first of all,
now have recommended to the superintendent that he put a presentation together over a very serious matter that is multiple Title IX cases. We haven't even discussed this as a board.
If I could, I think the purpose of this presentation is just to put exactly this letter's text up on the screens to facilitate that conversation. It's nothing other than the letter itself to facilitate our conversation.
So did you, I thought I heard you say recommendations, Roger.
These are the auditor's recommendations. They're not my recommendations. The auditor's recommendations, which is what everyone here wanted when we've talked about this at previous meetings. That was what was requested of the auditor. The auditor provided her recommendations. I asked Dr. Outlaw, for purposes of just the benefit of the public, to see what those recommendations.
I look forward to
And-
seeing Dr. Outlaw's recommendations.
No, it's not
look
Dr.
forward to it,
Outlaw's
and I know the
recommendations.
public looks forward to seeing it too.
It's the auditor's. It's the auditor's
You, as the
recommendations.
president of the school board, afford members of this school board the opportunity to have a conversation and a discussion about not only the letter, but the process that was used that ultimately led to this letter being written and created. You mentioned in your opening remarks that the board requested a report in September. That's factually wrong. That's not true. I, as a member of the policy committee meeting, which you and Ms. Reed incorrectly stated that I wasn't directed by the superintendent to bring this to the policy committee meeting, I actually went home and did my homework, and I have all of the stats, meeting minutes written by the superintendent, his meeting minutes sent to us as policy committee members for months. March, April, May, June, have all of them. And we're going to sit here today and say that it was September when we requested a report?
No.
I sat in a policy committee meeting at that table in February, this meeting right here, February 20th, and I said, Do we have a scope of work? Has the administration provided a scope of work to the legal counsel to investigate these Title IX cases? And do you know what the response was? She sat in the meeting, as did Ms. Reed. There was no scope of work provided. I have with me tonight the scope of work that Chad Scaling, who's no longer employed by the district, provided to our legal counsel. I'd like to read it into the record, and I'd like to walk the public through what actually happened without disclosing any confidential information, without disclosing any of the names of the involved parties, and provide the public with an honest assessment of what transpired. So,
Well, that's not, first of all, this is the superintendent report section of the agenda.
it is.
You have on the agenda at your request a waiver of the attorney-client privilege, which you asked to be added last time.
Correct. I
In
find it
September,
interesting, though.
let me finish,
Okay,
okay?
I will.
Okay, this is a courtesy.
Finish, Roger.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that, Mr.
You're
Storm.
welcome.
The September meeting is when you first raised the issue of waiving the attorney-client privilege. And it was at that meeting that we discussed that in lieu of, and you withdrew your proposal to withdraw the attorney-client privilege. And at that point, we discussed having the third-party auditor upon the completion. At that point, there wasn't a completion of all of the analysis of the three cases. That upon the completion of that, the auditor would prepare an executive summary, management summary, summarizing her findings and her recommendations that could only be done in compliance with the restrictions of the attorney-client privilege, the Title IX limitations on disclosure of public information or public disclosure of information, and the FERPA statute. That's what was requested in September when you first raised this issue about the waiver of the attorney-client privilege. We subsequently were waiting for the completion of her analysis. That was ultimately done. And then I requested that she provide, as we had discussed in September, the preparation of a non-privileged executive summary that could then be shared publicly. And that's what this is. This is what was requested in lieu of your proposal at that point in time in September of the waiver of the attorney-client privilege. I just got this late last week. I shared it as soon as I received it from the auditor. And so this was an issue that was placed on the agenda as quickly as possible because you've been clamoring to have this as soon as we got this information. So we put it on the agenda. I asked Dr. Outlaw to put the auditor's recommendations. This isn't my recommendation. This isn't Dr. Outlaw's recommendation. This isn't anybody's recommendation other than the expert herself who we engaged to conduct this analysis and to provide these recommendations. So that's what we're here for at this juncture. And I mean, as far as your desire, I don't know what you want to read. I don't think it's appropriate to read a bunch of emails. I mean, that's just, I don't think that's the appropriate course of action for us to take at this meeting. But Dr. Outlaw is going to share for the benefit of the public what the recommendations are from the auditor.
So you may, for those of you that are in the audience, you may have heard when Roger in his opening remarks made reference to the board requested a report in September. I'm glad he was able to clarify and correct the record in that the report that was requested was actually a request to waive attorney-client privilege to share the findings from the attorney with the public. I've been advocating since the beginning of the 2023 calendar year for independent third-party legal counsel to investigate Title IX cases in our district and have a very, very strong paper trail that explains the chronology of events that has led to us sitting here today in January of 2024 with a report that does not at all capture the spirit of the intent of what I was personally seeking and what I would hope the rest of this board was seeking as it relates to Title IX investigations in this district. If you go back to March of 2023, our superintendent and Chad Scaling, who is no longer employed by our district, asked legal counsel to investigate a couple items as it relates to multiple Title IX cases. Was the process followed according to law? Were the parents appropriately advised and aware of the challenges, limitations, and time expectations of Title IX process? Were the initial disciplinary separation steps taken at the beginning of the investigation appropriate for the situation? Was the time taken from the beginning of the investigation to the resolution appropriate for these cases? Were there any negative repercussions for victims or accusers as a result of the length of time of the investigation? Are there ways that the district can improve the experience for students and families involved, whether they were the victim or the accused, timing, communication, etc.? Were there other actions taken under the umbrella of Title IX that were unnecessary and/or that may have negatively impacted students involved in the investigation? Is there evidence of any malfeasance or dereliction of duty by district staff in any of these cases? Was there any undue influence exerted that may have influenced the way the case was handled? So that was what ultimately was presented to us at the policy committee meeting. We asked the superintendent if a scope of work had been provided to third-party legal counsel and discovered that a scope of work had not been provided. Shortly thereafter, we discovered that the investigator who the administration had ultimately hired was suggesting that they would not speak to any of the involved parties, both sides.
Mr. Storm, I'm sorry, if we get into the details of exactly how this was conducted, I'm concerned that we are waiving privilege around the conduct of the investigation. And that should be part of our discussion under 4 action when we are considering whether we'd like to waive the privilege around the investigation.
I believe I had the floor, Ms. Reed.
Well, but you are getting into areas that by
That's your
disclosure-
interpretation.
Well, no, it's
Both
not
of
my
you are
interpretation.
attorneys.
Okay.
Both of you are attorneys.
We're gonna proceed
Are you
forward
attorneys
with.
for the district or are you
No.
representing the citizens who elected you?
I'm not an attorney for anybody in
You
this
are. You're
capacity
attorney
as
for
a
Ms.
board.
Marks. At 2 board meetings ago, I mentioned she accused me of being uninformed when I brought this concern up. You accused me of assault.
You are completely out of line, Mr.
I'm not
Storm.
out of line.
You are here, you're making complete fabrications.
Is it a fabrication, Ms.
You
Marks?
are, you're.
Gentlemen. Okay, I'm not.
Hold on. No, we're done with this conversation. We're going to
You're
proceed
closing down
forward.
the discussion, aren't you?
No, you'll have your opportunity to come back when you have the waiver of the attorney-client privilege. We'll talk about it. But right now, we're going to continue forward with.
Why don't you want to discuss this?
I'm happy to discuss it, but this isn't the appropriate time.
No one
We're
did
gonna-
anything wrong in the district. Everything is fine. Everything is fine.
So what's the problem?
Why can't we discuss this?
Because
Since
we're
everybody
trying to
did
proceed
everything
forward.
Kosher and to policy, district policy.
We're trying to provide the recommendations of the auditor,
Before
and
we
you're
have it-
interfering.
before we
You're
have a
interfering.
discussion.
There's nothing to discuss.
There is nothing to
This
discuss.
is her conclusions and her recommendations, okay?
interview all the involved parties?
You're not an expert.
Did she interview all of the
So
involved
you're
parties?
getting into
Did she?
specifics.
Yes or no?
You're getting into specifics. I'm not the expert.
Did she?
I don't know who she
You
specifically
ran point
interviewed.
for our board with the
I
attorney
did
that
not.
was hired. After suggesting of taking it off of the responsibility of our superintendent.
Yeah, and let's talk about that because what happened, because again, you're giving half truths and you're giving
I am.
pieces of information
I
that
have
isn't the
all of
complete
this in-
story.
It's all in
What
writing from
happened
Chad
was,
Scaling, who's no longer employed by the
excuse me,
district.
Mr. Storm, let me finish. After the superintendent initially reached out to and had the communication with the auditor, we as a board decided that we would remove the administration from that process and that we would, as a board, have this engagement be direct with the board.
You got that right, as a board.
Hold on.
As a board.
We then had the executive committee, which was Mr. Trombley and myself and Ms. Marks, have the conversation with the auditor with regard to the scope of the engagement going forward through the board. That wasn't me.
The board or through the executive
Through the board,
committee? The board.
appointing the executive
How many updates did you
committee.
send to the board, Roger, after that?
Every time
regarding
we
this?
had a meeting, we talked about that
How many updates did you provide to the board thereafter?
every meeting.
Every meeting.
Yeah.
So we
So
talked
anyway,
about it
okay,
in
we're-
public board meeting.
We're going to proceed forward with the recommendations that were requested of the board that was provided by the auditor. And if you're going to stop interrupting that process so we can proceed forward.
I was
as
under the impression I'm entitled to discussion when
have.
an agenda item is brought up, but you've interrupted me multiple times. Ms. Reed interrupted me as I was speaking. You haven't given Ms. Marks an opportunity to respond to.
To your false allegations against her?
How do you know it's a false
Because
allegation?
I
You
heard
haven't
it.
even
I've
let her
already
speak.
heard
Oh,
it.
you heard what she said to me?
You said.
Oh, but you didn't hear what she said,
Okay.
nor let her speak. I'd like to let her speak. If it's false, I'd love for her to say it's false. Then I won't bring it up anymore. Was it false?
Mr. Storm, I honestly have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
So if you.
No recollection.
know. And
You don't know if you said it or didn't say it?
I don't recall this conversation.
Okay, well, that's all I asked. Thank you. Perfect. She doesn't recall.
Okay, so let's proceed forward with the recommendations, which is,
Would you like to do that or move on to the budget amendment at this point?
well, I mean, if we're going to ultimately
You're going to end up talking.
revisit
about it in a
this
second.
and have the, and dispel all of the false information that's been shared by Mr. Storm tonight, then I would suggest that we
I
go
will
ahead
share all of
and
this
deal
with
with
the
it at that point.
public. I'll
So let's
give it
move
to
forward
Star.
with, let's move
She
forward
can
with the
disclose
budget.
it publicly, and if any of
Okay.
this is false, please,
budget
Roger,
amendment.
correct the record at the next
Oh,
meeting.
for sure.
So the next topic on here is our primary topic for the day, which is the budget amendment. And as Mr. Jones gets set up, just for the public on this, when the original budget for the 23-24 school year is set in all of the different districts, it's all based on assumptions at that time because we don't have our enrollment numbers at that time. Typically, the state budget isn't set by that point. So the budget amendment is a chance to update those numbers. It's to update cost. And Mr. Jones is going to walk through this and provide you some information on where we sit today.
This guy. Why is it not fitting? Am I upside down? Thank you.
Yep, there we go.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. Let's go through amended budgets. In your packet, there are 3 resolutions tonight to asking to amend original budgets that were set in June. As Dr. Outlaw stated, when the state mandates that initial budgets must be done by June 30th. And in order to prepare a budget at that point in time, there's a lot of information that is unknown. So it's loaded with estimates. So at this point in time, we halfway through the year, we put together amended budgets for those funds that have changed substantially enough that we need to change their budget. So that being said, there are 3 funds that we have put forward for an amendment. One is the general fund. That is our large operating fund of the district. The food service fund, which I don't think I need to describe what that's for. And then the community education funds, we are asking for amendment on these 3. So I'm going to walk through what I want to do at this point in time is just go through what changed. Because you all went through the budget in June. You know what it was based on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through what changed in order to get to the numbers that we are presenting to you. So I'm going to start with the general fund, and the first portion of the general fund are the revenues. So for what is called the State Aid Foundation revenue, which is the basis, the money that we get based upon the number of students that we have, our enrollment was off our budget by 1/3%, a total of 34 FTEs, which is really, really good. Anybody would be really happy to miss by 1/3% on their estimate. The other thing that happened is last year, in fiscal year 23, the state changed how they reimburse special ed. And they gave districts 75% of the foundation amount for these special ed FTEs. At the very last minute, they changed that for 2024 and moved that to 100%. So when the budget was put together, it was still under the assumption that we would only get 75% reimbursement. So to the favor of the district, that was now moved to 100%. Biggest change in the revenues were the grant programs, because there's a lot of unknown when it comes to the grant programs early in the year. The state came up with a new grant to cover safety and mental health called 31AA. It's actually, this is still not even finalized. The application just closed for all the districts to apply for it. So we don't even know how much we're going to get. So this is an estimate that I put in. The state did increase the level of 31A, which is the at-risk reimbursement for all the districts. And then the CTE equipment grant that Jim Varga talked about, we never know if we're going to get that or not. So in the original budget, it was not in there. So everything that we get in that grant is in addition to the budget for this year. Some other reimbursement didn't change. The retirement services. So we get a percentage of, the state charges us for retirement, and we get a percentage of that back. And the amount that they determined they would be giving back to the districts increased since the original budget was done. And then the other piece, which is a good piece, I hope it lasts longer, is we're getting very good interest income, because right now the markets are favorable when it comes to earnings on cash. So I was able to change the level of income that we think we'll get from our interest. So on the expense side,
Are you able to share that? Just what is the interest rate on the cash?
we're getting about 4% right now.
And is it tax-free being that we're a
Mhm.
school? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
So going on to expenditures, so number one, our biggest expenditure are salaries. There's really only two really big things that changed over our initial budget, which is in the BEA contract, there is a clause that if enrollment goes up by a certain amount, it triggers an increase in their pay. And there's a kind of a sophisticated formula that figures out what that percentage is. Because the FTE enrollment in the district, not including shared services, went up, that trigger was reached. And so we've gone through the computation. And so those new numbers are included in the amended budget. And then the shared services, because their enrollment actually was down from what they budgeted in the spring, their salaries are also down too. So when it comes to benefits, which is our second largest expense category, the trigger now, because of the benefits related to the trigger. So that's your retirement and your FICA, which is a percentage of salaries. And then our health insurance has gone up based upon what we estimated in the budget. Our increase overall in health insurance is pretty good. It's just that it went up over budget. So we're still in pretty good shape with our health insurance. And then the other big portion of expenditures are capital outlay. So the first area here are the security cameras. You all approved in the fall about $700,000 of security cameras. That's all grant funded. So when I talked about those extra grants that we got, we were able to purchase those, but those were not in the original budget. The second thing that I put into the budget is I put in money to cover us because as the bond committee has gone through their work, we have come to the point now as we assess the bond dollars that based on the projects that are remaining, there are not enough bond dollars to cover all of those projects. But when it comes to this amount, because those projects have not been priced out, I could only estimate what this amount is. So some other expenditures that changed in the budget. Not real big changes here, but our maintenance costs have gone up a bit. Utilities have gone up a bit. And then the CT equipment that I talked about, because I have to add it to the budget now that we know what it is. And then a couple of expenditure decreases. We purchased our buses this year already, and we had put more in the budget than we needed to purchase those buses. So I was able to pull that budget back because we're not going to purchase any more buses this year. And then we're also, all the districts in the county are getting a transportation credit. The state of Michigan has made money available for districts for transportation. That everyone's getting a credit to help cover their transportation costs. Since we go through the county for our transportation costs, they're getting that money, but they will be passing that on to the districts. Any questions on general fund before I move on to food service? Okay. Now on to food service. Biggest change here, which is a really nice change for the district, is the state last minute decided they were going to cover the cost of all meals, breakfast and lunch. So all meals now are free. And what that means is the level of meals that we are providing now have gone up, because once you make those meals free, obviously everyone's going to take advantage of that. What that does, though, is because that's all coming from the state, that has increased because the state is paying us more than we would have gotten before. It has increased our revenue in food service, which is a good thing. So what we've done in order to use that extra money that we're getting is, number one, we paid out a staff bonus. But also too, so the second part is because our volumes are up of meals, obviously our food volumes are up. And then, of course, food costs have increased, as we all know that. They continue to increase over time. But it also has given us the opportunity of putting an extra $785,000 worth of money in the budget so they can buy equipment. So I've been working with food service to come up with a plan on how we're going to spend that money. Questions on food service before I move to community ed? No? All right, so community ed, again, good news here. Pretty much all the three main areas of community ed, their revenues are ahead of budget. We have seen some more expenses, but they are not exceeding the amount of revenue that we're getting. So we have run into some repairs that we have had to do, mainly at BCPA. And then we have also had some capital outlay at BCPA for some items that we needed to upgrade, which is the sound system and the backdrop. But when I finished up all the numbers, put everything together, how the run rate is going, the good thing is the amount of money that the district has to subsidize to make this a break-even operation is less than what we budgeted. So that's a good thing. So actually what that means is they're going to do better than what we expected. All right, so what does this mean for our net funds? So in the general fund side, our original amount was the $4,195,000. That was the original budget that was approved in June. When all these numbers are put together, that number now changes to $4,637,000. If that number rolls to the fund balance at the end of the year, that would put us at a 17.6% fund balance. On the food service side, we have a positive to the bottom line of about $95,000. The original was 54, so not a big change there. And they do have a significant fund balance there because over the last couple of years, the way food service has been reimbursed, it's been a very favorable operation. And then, like I talked about with community ed, that's basically a break even. The district just funds whatever shortfall there is. There was a positive balance at the end of last year when everything was said and done. So this year we were able to actually spend a little bit more to get us back to zero. So, and that's it. Any questions?
Just a comment. Last year, I was extremely critical of your predecessor's process and just the lack of clarity around how the budget was communicated to us. And I just want to thank you for the very, very nice, easy summary that you put together to communicate these changes to us in a very, very professional manner. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
I've got a question. In regards to the BCPA, and I know, do we actually make money there, or do we break even, or do we lose money?
It overall loses money. The district funds the difference to bring them to a zero balance.
Okay, so, and the reason why I'm asking this is because, you see these programs that the BCPA puts on. There's a BCPA board that puts these things together. They charge admission for the people to come here. The musical, I know they lay money out, but then they sell these things out and the revenue comes back in. Where does that kind of money go? How do we end up paying when they have those type of performances? They're charging money, they're receiving revenue, they're bringing in. How do we end up? Why is it costing us to have the BCPA?
You know what? I would have to pick through all the individual expenses, but you have your staff and the benefits. And like I said, this year we've had to do some repairs and buy some new equipment.
Well, and that goes back to the revenue side of things. When you have this BCPA board, they have these shows and everything. What are they doing for us?
Right. And I see what you're saying. I don't have the numbers memorized, so I can't right off the top of my head tell you. So I can go back if you want me to. I could pick through the details and come up with it.
I would just like to know, because it seems the ticket costs, the charges, we already own the BCPA, right? I mean, yeah, we have upkeep and things. The staff, I know we have to have somebody there full time, but that's all baked into the rental costs and the cost of renting the BCPA, right?
And that's the part I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, because I have not looked at that,
Okay,
but it's, I understand what you're asking and I'll take a look at it.
great, thanks.
Anything else?
That's it. Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
All right. And that's it for the superintendent report and moves us to the.
Quick question for Dr. Outlaw regarding this section before we move to the next.
Oh, right now.
You didn't give us an opportunity earlier, so it's related to the question I posed regarding the bridge. And I'm seeking clarity on how that will be handled. It seemed like you and Dr. Outlaw acknowledged the recommendation that we should consider the bridge as it relates to some of the improvements for the science equipment that was brought forth tonight. And all I'm seeking is clarity on, will the bridge be considered? And if so, how?
Yeah, I already said yes.
You said yes, but I've learned to ask for clarity. So all I'm seeking, what will be done between now and the next meeting as it relates to the bridge?
So I will meet with the principal and ask her to assess what the needs are. There's one science class at the bridge, singular course. So we will see what the needs are there. And
There's a recommendation for it?
it probably won't have to come here because it's one. And it's going to be way below a threshold. If maybe they get one microscope. I mean, maybe that's all they need. Since
Terrific.
They only have a few kids in the class. So.
Terrific.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. This brings us to the call to the public portion of the agenda. If there's anyone here that would like to address the board, this is your opportunity to do so. We ask that you fill out a card at the rear of the room, and it does not look like there has been any cards that have been completed. So that will conclude the call to the public and move us to the for action portion of our agenda. Item A, regular meeting minutes of January 8, 2024. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Reed, support by Dr. Krebs. Any discussion?
Yes, I have a comment regarding an item I brought up during the last meeting, specific to the minutes. Board Policy 2300 outlines board member conduct, and it states that each board member will remember that a board member's primary concern must be the educational welfare of students attending the district schools. Make decisions only after consideration at legally held board meetings. And in section B, it says a board member will not act in isolation or act operating as if a board of one. At the last board meeting, I raised concern about the for future action section of the November 13th board meeting, which stated item B under for future action, extension of superintendent contract. In that board packet on page 27 was this page that states extension of superintendent contract. It is recommended that the board extend Dr. Outlaw's contract effective through June 30th, 2029. At our December 11th board meeting, I have a copy of the agenda. Under for action, it says superintendent contract. And in that board packet, there's a recommendation on page 27. It says it is recommended that the board extend Dr. Outlaw's contract effective through December 10th, 2028. And then there's a hard copy of a contract that our board president, per your own admission, Roger, worked with the superintendent to create. And I am unable, I asked this at the last meeting, I'm unable to find where we, as a board, authorized you to engage with the superintendent to prepare this contract that was in the board packet on December 11th. And I'm seeking clarity on when we as a board voted to authorize our board president to negotiate a $1.4 million contract that was voted on. I can't find any record of that.
Okay, well, first of all, your question is factual. There's many errors factually built into your question.
Okay.
Second of all, this is to approve the minutes. Nothing that you talked about is in any way not consistent with what's in the minutes. If you, Mr. Storm, have any proposed changes to what's in these draft minutes, tell me what your proposal is, because it will have to be a motion to amend, and then we will discuss and vote on it. So do you have any changes to what is in the minutes that you believe does not accurately reflect what was discussed at the January 8th
Did I
meeting?
bring up at the last board meeting concern regarding the minutes and requested that Star make a change to the minutes specific to your work with the superintendent on the superintendent's contract?
Yeah, and we specifically said that Mr. Storm voiced concern regarding the process of the approval of new superintendent contract. We specifically talked about that very language because there was discussion about whether that should be added or not, and that's verbatim to what was discussed, and that's what's in the draft minutes.
And when I expressed concern about what I've brought forth tonight, what was the response from you, Roger?
There's no response. This is what happened on January 8th. Either you agree with what's reflected in these minutes happened on January 8th, or you don't. And if you don't, then please enlighten us as to what you think is not accurately reflected here.
I think the concern that I expressed regarding you working on your own without the authority of this board to negotiate a $1.4 million contract is something that I want added back into the minutes that we struck through the discussion we had at the last board meeting.
Okay, well, A, that is also factually inaccurate. That's not what happened. And B, that's not what was discussed. We specifically talked about adding this language. You agreed to it and everyone else agreed to it. So we're not here to resurrect and reconsider what we wanted or what you may have wanted to have happened back on January 8th. This is to capture what actually happened on January 8th. Whether you're unhappy with what was actually discussed and what happened is completely irrelevant to the question of whether this accurately reflects what did happen. And so I'm going to ask you now a third time, if you have a specific language that you believe needs to be changed to accurately reflect on what happened on January 8th, then you need to tell us.
I think what I'd like to do is to make a motion to add for future action to the next board meeting, discussion as a board regarding how you ultimately negotiated a $1.4 million contract with the superintendent without us as a board voting on it.
Okay, well, again, that's factually inaccurate, number one, and procedurally, it's flawed because we're not here to vote on what can or can't be for future action. I'll tell you a fourth time.
But
This is,
specific to the meeting
we are deciding whether there's a motion on the table to approve these minutes as an accurate reflection of what happened on January 8th. We're not here to talk at this point about future action, theoretical action, what action I wish I would have happened when I was there. So you've said your piece. Is there anyone else?
You and I are entitled to our opinion. We have freedom of speech as members of this board.
And you've had plenty of opportunity.
Thankfully, that's why I ran for school board. You are entitled to disagree with me. This particular agenda item relates to meeting minutes. I raised concern at the last board meeting regarding the specific change that was made to the meeting minutes, and through discussion at that board meeting, my assertion that you acted alone was called into question. I went home, I went through the prior board meetings, the recordings and the hard copies of what was presented to all of us as a board, and I am unable to find a single reference to where we as a board voted to authorize you to negotiate a $1.4 million contract that was brought into the board packet on December 11th, and I'm making a motion that get added for future action to the next board agenda, so we have an opportunity to discuss it in an appropriate time and forum as a specific agenda item as a board. So that's my motion.
Okay, well, for 4 strikes and you're up, Mr. Storm. This is not the
Is that like a
procedural
threat, Roger?
No,
or
it's not a
what?
threat.
So-
It's the
so what do you mean 4 strikes and I'm
It
out?
means we're not going to continue to have a debate about what is the procedurally proper way to address it. I've given you ample opportunities.
Mr. Myers, if I could, we have a motion on the table. I would like to call the question on the motion that's on the table on the minutes.
You need 2/3 of a vote to call the question.
Okay?
Right, so do we have, Ms. Ackermight, have a roll call vote on the request to call the question?
Yes. Mr. Trombley,
No.
Mr. Storm,
No.
Mr. Conley,
No.
Mrs. Marks,
Yes.
Dr. Krebs,
Yes.
Ms. Reed,
Yes?
Mr. Myers.
Yes, so that did not pass, so we'll have further discussion then. So who else?
If I
You've had your-
could though, I am very interested in knowing if there is a change to these minutes that anyone would like to make so that we can vote on these minutes. I respect your request for an additional item for us to discuss at the next meeting. And I will say that I would support the discussion, but I would like for us to get through the minutes before we vote on the things that we're going to do the next time we get together.
That's all I'm asking.
I thought he made a motion and I supported it.
It's not a motion to amend the
But
minutes.
we
That's
already,
the only thing
we
that's
already have a motion on the
procedurally.
table.
Right.
Okay. So what happens to the motion then that's out there now as well that he asked for that I supported?
Because you can't have a motion to add for future action as an amendment to, the only amendment that can be made, only motion, would you please let me finish?
Sure.
The only motion that procedurally is correct is if he wants to, we're considering the minutes, okay? There's only one other motion in this context that would be procedurally allowed, and that would be a motion to amend the minutes where he could then propose what he's changing. That hasn't happened. And so that's why there's only one motion related to the minutes.
So if you wanted to amend the minutes for that motion, he could.
He could but I've given him 4 chances and I've not heard anything yet about what you are proposing to amend these minutes.
So two
So
things.
one more chance.
One more chance, really? Well, that's very nice of you. I would like to amend the minutes to reflect what I requested in the last meeting, and that is to add back into the meeting minutes that our president acted on his own without the full vote of the Brighton School Board to negotiate a $1.4 million contract with our superintendent that was presented to the board during the, let me give you the exact date, Start, December 11th board meeting. And at no time prior to that date or after did we vote to authorize the president to negotiate that contract with the superintendent.
Okay, so we have a motion to add something that you wish you wouldn't have withdrawn, that you want to add back in.
That's
So where,
correct.
so where do you want in this draft of the minutes?
Where it references that.
Hold on, let me finish. Where you want to add in something that you wish you would have left in, but you withdrew from being part of that meeting. Where do you want that to be put in there?
Wherever you'd like to put it in there. As long as it's in the record, I'm happy. It was removed because my assertion was called into question. And at the last meeting, I did not have the facts that I have today. So I'm respectfully requesting that it get added back now that I have demonstrated with fact that we never voted as a board to authorize you to do that, to take that action.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend, to add somewhere in the minutes, Mr. Storm's desire that he wish he wouldn't have withdrawn something that he originally wanted to have in there regarding the process for the superintendent contract. All right, got a second by Mr. Connolly. Any discussion?
Yeah, I am not in support of it, and I'm going to explain why. I supported prior when we amended the minutes. I think the minutes are supposed to be a general reflection of the meeting, and if we get caught up in repeatedly putting individual comments in meetings made by specific board members, we have a recording that we can go back to. And my opinion is what's in here currently reflects your concern. And so just when I don't support it, that's my reasoning, so you understand.
Do you recall at the last board meeting where we had the discussion and I had expressed concern of Roger acting on his own without the full support and voting authority of this board? And through discussion, ultimately agreed to remove that from the change that Star was making to the meeting minutes?
I remember that we agreed to add this in, yes, and that you altered your amendment.
Okay,
Mhm.
super.
And I remember that too because it was factually not accurate,
Okay.
which is why there was the debate and the ultimate decision to withdraw that because it wasn't factually
We
accurate.
did vote,
So
so we as a board did vote to authorize you to negotiate a $1.4 million
that
contract?
wasn't the issue. No.
Oh, okay.
All right, so we have the motion to amend as proposed by Mr. Storm, seconded by Mr. Conley. All those in favor of the motion to amend signify by aye.
I'd like to request a roll call vote.
Sure, roll call vote, Ms. Sacramite.
Mr. Storm,
I am in favor of editing the minutes.
Mr. Trombley,
Yes.
Mr. Conley,
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Marks,
No.
Dr. Krebs,
No.
Ms. Reed,
No.
Mr. Myers.
No. So the motion to amend fails 3-4. So now it brings us back to the original motion to approve the minutes as presented. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Nay.
That passes 4-3. All right. That moves us to then the budget amendment. I know that there was the presentation, but I believe this is the point now for action for approval of the budget amendment. Do we have a motion to approve the budget amendment as presented by Mr. Jones? So Mr. Conley,
Support.
support by Ms. Reed. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? That passes 7-0. That moves us to item C, the waiver of the attorney-client privilege. This was the item that was requested by Mr. Storm at the last meeting to put on the agenda the proposal to waive the attorney-client privilege regarding the confidential attorney-client privilege reports from the third-party auditor. So I guess, do we have a motion?
Do we have a motion?
Yeah, are you somebody going to make a motion for that? Wait, before we can have a discussion on that topic.
I would like to make a motion that we as a board waive attorney-client privilege and release the report as presented to us in closed session without any reference to any of the involved individuals that were non-BAS employees. So accuser, accused, all their names removed from the report, but absolutely include every BAS stakeholder that was involved in all of the Title IX cases.
All right, so we have a motion by Mr. Storm, support by Mr. Conley. Any discussion?
So a couple
And a little bit, but just real quick, before, it's important to understand that because the privilege hasn't been waived, nobody should say anything relating to the privileged information as a basis to then support the
Dr.
waiver.
Outlaws threatened me with a misdemeanor. I think Ms. Reed in the last meeting threatened me with a misdemeanor.
No, it's not
So
threatening. It's to remind you, Mr.
it
Storm,
is.
that it is a misdemeanor.
It's an
and
implied
you
threat,
you
but
have
that's okay. I
crossed
can
the
handle
line.
it, Roger.
Okay, good. We're looking out for your best
I
interest,
work,
Mr.
I work
Storm.
with and deal with attorneys every day of my life.
Sure you do.
Yep.
Motion on the table.
So I had mentioned in the prior part of the board meeting that I have been advocating for well over a year to release the report that we as a board reviewed. And I do feel that it is in the interest of the public for us to release the report and again, protect the confidentiality of the involved parties. I do think that it's very, very important that all of the administration that were involved in the Title IX cases, plural, that were reviewed, that information is shared in an open and honest and transparent manner with the community. Some of my peers on this board have mentioned to me that there's concern about liability, that we as a district would ultimately be responsible. And my position, and I'd like to state this publicly, is that if we as a school district did something wrong and we're liable because of doing something wrong, that the public should be made aware of that. We should not be hiding information from the public. If mistakes were made, then we as a board, working in partnership with the community, should correct those mistakes and work on improving this district for the better. I have repeatedly stated in this forum, if there were no mistakes made and no one did anything wrong, and the glowing report that was provided by the third-party attorney who our board president and superintendent worked with, if nothing was wrong, then what's the issue with releasing the report, provided that all of the confidentiality of the involved parties outside of BAS are preserved? I would point out to you that in the letter that Roger referenced earlier, there's a specific language that for any of you who work with attorneys on a regular basis, you know words matter. And you'll see terms that state, I did not find any evidence, right? That means the attorney did not find any evidence. It does not necessarily mean that there was a concerted effort on a part of our district to share evidence with the third-party investigator. It also says, nor did I find any substantive Title IX violations. Again, nor did I find, right? That does not necessarily mean that there weren't any. It means that the third-party legal counsel that our board president worked with did not find any. So words matter. And I would just like to highlight, if you go back to the scope of work that Chad Scaling, who's no longer employed by this school district, provided to legal counsel after we as a policy committee met in the spring of 2023 and discovered that there wasn't a scope of work. Take a look at that scope of work and then ask through the prism of the report that Roger referenced if in fact the scope of work aligns with what you see captured in the report. My last comment regarding this matter, before I turn the floor over to others for comment, in April of 2023, almost a year ago, I mentioned in a communication with our superintendent, Dr. Outlaw, the source of my expressed concern at the policy committee meeting, remember they stated we never discussed this at the policy committee, expressed concern at the policy committee meeting on Monday, April 3rd, and in messages shared since then, was related to what you communicated to me, Jennifer, and Alicia, who are on the policy committee with me. You stated that the legal counsel the district engaged to conduct the investigation communicated to the district that it did not believe interviews of the involved parties were warranted. I spoke up and questioned how an investigation could be conducted without speaking to the involved parties and establishing a fact pattern that lays out the chronology of events in each of the Title IX cases and the actions that were taken by the involved parties, i.e. members of this administration. So I want to continue to advocate for the complete release of this report in an unredacted manner, with the exception, of course, of the involved parties that were non-BAS employees.
If I could.
Sure.
There were a couple of things that you said, Mr. Storm, that I do agree with. I think it is very important for us as a board to ensure that we are honest and transparent about the ways that our district can be better. That's one of the core responsibilities I think that we have in our role as, in our oversight role here at the board. And so I do take that very seriously. And I agree that we should be open and honest with the public about the way that we engage in our responsibilities as a district, so that we can be further transparent about the ways that we need to improve, and that they can hold us accountable for whether or not we've improved. I think that should be true in everything that we do as a district. The work that was done here was part of our effort to ensure that we had quality information to work from. Because I'm not aware that any of us up here at the board table, that are members of the board, would consider ourselves experts on the legal requirements of Title IX. So we were looking for outside assistance that would not be part of the administration and part of our current process, in order to gain a perspective on whether our processes and procedures were appropriate and were in practice as we expected them to be. And I think the non-privileged document that we received from that auditor, who is a professional and bound by the responsibilities of the profession to provide us with an accurate statement satisfies that need for transparency without jeopardizing the individual rights of the participants in the process. One of the wonderful things about where we live is that this is it's a big, small town. I can go to the grocery store every weekend and run into somebody that my kids go to school with. We all have that experience. That's one of the things that makes Brighton a beautiful place to live. But it also means that releasing a report that, because it was intended to be privileged, has very detailed information about very specific incidents, and there are only 3 of them, means that our friends and neighbors can figure out who's in those reports. And it would be incredibly difficult to provide any level of substance or transparency while still respecting the individual rights of the people that are involved. And that's the reason that I will not be voting to waive the privilege on those underlying documents. I'm frankly concerned that we continue to have this discussion in this way. I would hope that we could get to a point as board members where we can civilly discuss our responsibilities and talk about the ways to make the district better without continuing to keep alive allegations that have not been supported by the audit. Because we would not have gotten that letter from our auditor if it wasn't accurate as written. That attorney would not jeopardize their entire livelihood to provide us with some false sense of comfort. So I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
So,
But let's everyone have a chance to
sure,
talk.
no problem.
Yeah. You want?
I just wanted to mention, you said words matter. I very much agree with that. I wanted to clarify one thing that was said repeatedly in this discussion today and other days. This was an independent process audit, so this was done independent of administration. While my understanding is this attorney had access to whatever records they needed and could do interviews, our administration was not involved with them. And so I just wanted to clarify that because I feel like that's a little misleading that they were working with the superintendent. I don't think that was the case. I think we all agreed to, as a board, a process audit, which is, in my opinion, what we received, not an investigation or a re-investigation of cases. This was a process audit.
when did Roger Myers and the executive committee take over the investigation from our superintendent or from the administration?
Well, I'll be happy to answer that.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, because I believe everyone should have an opportunity. Would anyone else like to chime in before I respond? Well, go ahead, Mr. Conley.
Well, the bottom line is some things may not have gone right. And for us to defend that they did is incorrect. And to say that everything's perfect, because everything's not perfect if they didn't go right. I mean, there's decisions that have to be made if they did or didn't. So, but under our state laws, a child means a person who is less than 18 years of age. And guardian, custody, are subject to the authority of that person, would mean our schools. Also talks about the parent, but the last part's just to keep it short as I can. You go down here, it says it very clearly. Omission, the person's omission or reckless act causes physical harm to a child, or the person knowingly and intentionally commits an act that is, under the circumstances, posing an unreasonable risk of harm or injury to a child, regardless of whether physical harm resulted, are acts that are actually against the law. It's a misdemeanor, then a felony. First count's a misdemeanor, second count says a felony. So the case is, did that happen? Or didn't it? We've said it didn't. I didn't, according to what we've learned. But I don't know. But we never found out. I think that's what Mr. Storm's trying to get at. I assume. Is that correct, Mr. Storm?
I mean,
Something like
I'd like to give Roger a chance to speak, but I definitely have some follow-up to the comments that were made.
Well, I'm saying it's a serious situation that we're dealing with, and I think everybody takes their job seriously. Mistakes could be made, whatever.
Does Brighton area schools keep all of the closed caption television when a Title IX case is brought to the administration's attention? Do we as a district preserve the video for all of the involved parties indefinitely?
Well, it's preserved for, I mean, sometimes the complaints don't even come in until long after the loop, and that has happened.
In an
And
instance
obviously,
where the complaint comes in the day of, does district policy today establish Brighton area schools is responsible for preserving all of the video content pertaining to the incident that is captured in a Title IX complaint when it's submitted to this school district in a timely manner?
all of the video is maintained for, is it 30 days or 60 days?
It's 30, but when we have a disciplinary matter that is caught on camera, we keep it for longer.
Okay.
So, yes, we do.
So so unless anyone else, oh, no, hold on. I haven't had my chance
Did you
to,
answer my question?
yes, I did.
So
So the
is it
question
yes or no?
is there
Just
anyone,
for the
is
record,
there
Roger, is it
anybody,
yes or no?
Dr. Krebs?
I'd like
Notice
to-
they didn't answer the question.
I did answer the question.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. First of all, I think it's really important to realize that that we have a professional auditor here who is an expert with Title IX investigations. As Ms. Reed stated, I don't think any of us on the board, or at least the board members, are experts on this kind of Title IX investigation. So she had access to what she needed to draw these conclusions. If she needed to do something, I'm fairly comfortable that she was able to get what she wanted. If not, this is her professional experience. She knew what she wanted to get. I'm going to follow her recommendations, and I agree with what she said, or I should say that reading what she said, I do not see that there needs to be a release of the attorney-client privilege. When asked, this is what she presented to us. Again, this is using her professional knowledge. This is what we could be releasing to the public. I'm going to follow her advice.
So your position is she had access to all the information she needed?
Yes.
I disagree.
Okay.
And what's the source of your basis that she did not
The
have?
report that I read that stated she did not have access to everything that she needed.
Okay, well, first of all, there's nothing in this report that says she didn't have access.
Correct.
Right.
That's why I
She-
want
she
you to
has
release
full
the-
access.
That's why I want
That's-
you to release the other report.
Again,
and
I'm
waive
going to caution you
attorney-client
about,
privilege.
first of all, you're making statements that are false.
Okay.
That are also,
Release the
that
report
are
then.
also based upon information that you're claiming is in a confidential report that in and of itself is a violation of your
Any
fiduciary
member
duty
of
and the
the
statutory law.
administration,
It's
did
my
any of the
turn.
member of the
Miss-
administration have a
Miss-
direct
Mr.
reporting
Trombley, do you have-
relationship with
Mr.
one of the
Trombley, do you
involved
have
parties in
anything
a
to say?
Title IX case?
No, Mr. Storm is done because everyone has a chance to talk.
Did anyone in the
You have-
administration have a direct reporting relationship to anyone that was involved in one of these Title IX cases?
No.
Okay.
All right. So first of all, let me just circle. I agree with everything that Ms. Reed said, and Ms. Marks and Dr. Krebs. But getting back to Mr. Conley's comments first, you read the statute about intentional mistreatment of children or under their care. I mean, the report itself is very clear that there was no evidence of any intentional noncompliance with Title IX. There was no actions that on the part of any employee or administrator that would warrant any disciplinary action against any employee or administrator. Now, I'm not a Title IX expert. You're not, Mr. Nobody up here is a Title IX expert. That's why we hired this individual who is a Title IX expert, because it's a very complex statute. And we wanted to be able to have somebody who has that expertise be able to look at these situations and based upon their extensive experience and expertise, give us their professional opinion. And because of that expertise, I think that is important to then address the issue that you've raised, Mr. Storm, and your complaints about the delay in getting the completion of the audit by the auditor. I think it's really important for people to understand that what we agreed to do in hiring a third party to conduct a retrospective forensic audit is probably unprecedented by any school district.
Forensic audit?
Yeah, by any district in the state, because what
forensic
happens in these
audit
cases,
was done.
will you please stop interrupting me?
Forensic audit.
All right, will you please stop interrupting me? So what happens in virtually every situation is when you have an active Title IX case, the school district, or if it's a college or, public institution, they hire outside counsel to assist the district or assist the public body in handling and processing the Title IX cases. And that's what we do as a district as well. Because those, and the timeliness of the completion of those active Title IX cases take priority, those are the cases that are given the top priority. And so what happened was, and I've explained this multiple times, when you've been here every single time, Mr. Storm, that part of the, as I would get information from the auditor as far as the time frame that she believes she would complete her audit, I would convey that. And ultimately, there were delays. She wasn't able to complete the audits in the time frame that she was hoping for among the various matters because she was involved in numerous ongoing active Title IX cases that demanded her priority. I mean, that's just the way it is. That wasn't me telling her or setting her timetable or anyone else. That was the time frame that she could commit to because she necessarily had to prioritize those cases. And so I would say that, this notion of questioning transparency, I mean, frankly, we as a board, what we did was really out of the ordinary in terms of going above and beyond to try to prepare our district to deal with Title IX cases. I mean, the fortunate thing is we don't have very many Title IX cases. I mean, we don't. We're very fortunate about that. Unlike many districts around the state that do have a much greater degree of prevalence of Title IX cases. And so we don't have that. But in order to make sure that when those rare instances arise, when we do have a Title IX complaint and we want our people to be trained and to have the knowledge that's needed to process and complete those Title IX matters, we decided to have a retrospective audit done. And I mean, districts don't do that, but we wanted to do that as a board to ensure that we would look at that any best practices that are out there that we may or may not be following would be implemented, any forms, any administrative procedures. I mean, that's what we really wanted to do, is to get an assessment of the process. Obviously, in each of those instances, there was a decision made to either affirm the Title IX violation or deny the Title IX violation. And each of those parties has the right, regardless of whether there's an affirmation or a denial, to challenge that decision legally. They have the right to do that. Our role was not to assess the merits of each of these individual cases and make a decision whether they should have been properly denied or affirmed. That wasn't what we were looking to do. We wanted to make sure that when we do get these future complaints, because that's what we're trying to do, is learn how we can make the process better going forward, that what are the best practices that we may not be implementing? What are the changes to the administrative guidelines that we may need to incorporate? What are the templates that need to be added or supplemented that we aren't currently using, so that we do in the future handle and process Title IX cases to the best of our ability and to the extent that we can in compliance with the Title IX regulations. That was the purpose of the audit. But again, because that is something that's unique and takes a much lower priority, unfortunately, that process got prolonged in the completion of the reports by the Title IX auditor. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation, and there isn't anything that anybody could have done any differently regarding that. So, having said that, we had the auditor we gave the auditor carte blanche authority to ask for any information that the auditor wanted. Any documents the auditor wanted, any interviews of people that the auditor wanted. I mean, that's the auditor's job. None of us have the expertise to determine or decide how that audit is going to be conducted. And so that's what it was turned over to the auditor. The auditor did the investigation in accordance with her professional experience and what she believed was the most appropriate means of completing that audit, and that's what she did. So the suggestion that somehow the administration or anybody within this district was withholding information is just egregious. I mean, that's just an absolute ridiculous statement. Withholding.
I said they're withholding?
You were insinuating that information was not being shared was what was the comment. So that to me is
How do you share
withholding.
information
So
if the information doesn't
the question
exist?
is, the question then, the comment that was made was that there was comments regarding a concern regarding liability. And that's correct, because as pointed out in the expert's letter, she makes it very clear that the disclosure of this information in the reports, it contains substantial information that's protected by the attorney-client privilege, that's prohibited from disclosure by Title IX. Hold on, would you please, Mr. Snorum, how many times do I have to tell you to stop interrupting me?
Well, I'm
I mean, you're capable
take
of-
a breath, Roger.
It's also prohibited from disclosure by Title IX, and it's also prohibited from disclosure by the FERPA statute. So the concern about liability is the disclosure of the report itself, not necessarily the contents of the report. It's just the mere disclosure of the report itself raises significant potential liability issues because of the protections that I just identified. And so as a consequence, consistent with any standard practice of any attorney-client privilege, whether it's in the public sector or private sector, but in particular in this context of the public sector, because of all of the specific information that should not be disclosed publicly, our auditor made it very clear that these reports should be maintained as confidential under the attorney-client privilege. She provided the non-confidential report that summarizes her findings and provides the recommendations that we can incorporate to move forward to improve the processes that we utilize in processing future Title IX cases. Mr. Conley made the comment of something about perfect. Nobody's suggesting that everything was perfect. I mean, nothing's generally done perfectly. It's the idea is that whatever best practices and changes that can be made to improve how we process future cases, that's what we want. And that's what this report contains. And I mean, the bottom line is that we have an obligation as a district. We as individual boards, we have a fiduciary duty to the district. And as part of the fiduciary to do the district is to act in the manner that's in the best interests of the district. And the reason that documents and communications are deemed to be confidential under attorney-client privilege is because it's in the best interest of the district for us to receive privileged information from which then non-confidential disclosures and information can be shared with the public to provide them with the information so that they understand what we're doing and how we're going to proceed going forward. And that's what we did. Anybody who votes in favor of waiving the attorney-client privilege, in my opinion, is directly contrary to their fiduciary, is a breach of their fiduciary duties. Because you have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of the district, and that's just reckless to just throw caution to the wind and waive an attorney-client privilege, particularly in the context of what we have here before us, where the information that isn't privileged is being shared in the spirit of transparency. All right.
You done?
I am done.
Okay. I'd like to respond. Ms. Reed mentioned we have a responsibility, or need to civilly, she'd like to see us civilly discuss our responsibilities related to this matter. And, my question for Ms. Reed is, when? This is the first time this process started in February for me. In February, I joined the board in January. And this process started in February of 2023. And I'd love to hear when we've had an opportunity to civilly discuss the areas of opportunity for our district to handle Title IX cases. We've not ever had any meaningful discussion at the board table as a board regarding these matters prior to this evening. Roger mentioned it was a forensic audit. I think he has two particular investigations mixed up. I don't believe that this was a forensic audit, this Title IX investigation. We did not. I've shared the scope of work verbatim from Chad Scaling's email, who's no longer employed by the district, I might add. And it does not reference at all a forensic audit. And I know from reading the report that a forensic audit was not conducted. But when a forensic audit was conducted in Brighton area schools in the 2023 calendar year, where the district hired a forensic auditor who is a former FBI investigator to investigate a district matter, I can tell you that that report was done in months and handled in a very, very expeditious manner. And it was extremely unfortunate how that particular circumstance was handled by our administration. And thankfully, some of the involved parties are no longer employed by our district, and I'm grateful for that. The comment around gave auditor carte blanche to access information. My question to this board is, for those that have read the report, what information was provided to the auditor if the information didn't exist? It's easy to say in a public forum, we gave the investigator access to all the information. But what if the involved members of administration did not keep record of any of the involved happenings that pertain to these particular Title IX cases? And my question is, what are we as a board going to do to correct that behavior to ensure it doesn't happen to future involved parties who are involved in Title IX cases in this district? The release raises concern about liability. Of course it does. We, as a board, have complete control over waiving attorney-client privilege on this particular report. We can vote tonight. We can waive attorney-client privilege. We can fully protect the identity of all the involved parties. We can ensure that no one in a grocery store will be able to connect the dots, because the goal of releasing the report is to share with the public in a transparent manner, not the specifics pertaining to the individuals at the grocery store. It's to highlight where we as a school district can improve our Title IX processes that, by the way, involve situations such as rape of children. That's the gravity of this particular item before us tonight. And I think we, as a board, owe it to this community to release the report, protecting the confidentiality of the involved parties. We waive attorney-client privilege. And if no one in the school district and no one in the administration did anything wrong, all of the related information involving individuals that are not related to Brighton area schools is wiped out, blacked out on the report. Then my question is, what is the reason why everyone is so hesitant to release the report? And if we as a district did something wrong, the public deserves to know, and we ultimately need to be held accountable for those actions, and we need to correct them as a school board working in partnership with the administration. That's my position on this matter, and I do think that it's extremely, extremely important we as a board give it thought and recognize that this involves some very, very serious matters involving young children, as Mr. Connolly mentioned a minute ago.
Any further comment?
I would like to make one last comment. I do think that this is important, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation in this particular way tonight, because we've had lots of bits and pieces of this conversation over the last year. And Mr. Storm, I got to say, I share your frustration that it took us a year to get here. It shouldn't have. In my professional capacity, if I had hired an outside auditor to perform an audit for me and it took a year to get the report that I asked for, I would be pretty ticked off. And I think as a board, we conveyed our concern and dismay that this audit was taking so long.
Who did?
Several of us. I know I did. And I know that you did, and I know that Mr. Trombley and Mr. Hanley did. I think Mr. Myers did. Yeah.
I wasn't able to communicate with the attorney.
I apologize. Let me be more clear. I'm not suggesting that I spoke directly with the attorney either. I was conveying that information to Mr. Myers, and I do believe that he conveyed that to the attorney. And the decision that we had in front of us was to stop working with the auditor that we had hired and move to someone else if that auditor couldn't meet a better time frame. And we continued with this auditor. Should we have switched to someone else? I don't know. The recommendations that we got for this particular person were pretty good. I don't know if we would have been happy with a faster report from a less skilled outside auditor, but that's something that we'll have to consider the next time we go into an audit, which we want to prioritize the skill of the auditor, the speed in which the work can be done. But for me, I think what we're asking for, what we want to be able to share with the public, is the document that we got in an unprivileged manner, because it is the conclusions on how we can improve. It is the conclusion that there were no errors of law in the work that was done, and it's there for the public to see. And I'm concerned that we continue to have the conversation as if there's something hiding, but there isn't. We got a report from our auditor that says the rules were followed. I don't know what else we want. That's what we got. And we're prepared to, it is public. It's not attorney-client privileged. So from my perspective, we've gotten what we asked for, and it satisfies both what I was looking for as an individual board member, and it satisfies my concern that we be able to make the results of this review public. Thank you.
All right. We have a roll call vote. The motion on the table that's been supported is to waive the attorney-client privilege regarding the Title IX auditor report. Ms. Ackermite, roll call, please.
Mr. Conley?
Your vote, a yes vote would be to waive the attorney-client privilege.
On the prior reports.
On the prior, yes.
On the prior, not on the current one that's on, that we.
Already not
This is public.
privileged.
It's not privileged, right? Right.
That's a redacted report as discussed.
No, it's not a redacted report. It's an executive
Put
summary.
it up on the screen.
This is what.
That's what I was trying to do earlier, but yeah.
Hold on.
Right.
The motion is to release a redacted version of the report we reviewed in closed session that ensures with 100% certainty the privacy of the involved parties is not disclosed, but does disclose in its entirety the involved members of the administration who were involved in all of the Title IX cases, so the public and we as a board can assess and review that in a public forum.
Yes, for me.
You say yes. Mrs. Marks?
No.
Mr. Storm?
Yes.
Dr. Krebs?
No.
Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
No.
Mr. Myers?
No. Motion fails 3-4. Closes the for action portion of our agenda and moves us into for future action, science technology. Is there anything further that needs to be discussed or have any questions about with respect to?
A and B will be on for action at the next meeting.
I have just a quick question. Maybe they mentioned it and I missed it. What is the delivery time for these if we vote to approve? Like, what are we looking for lead time for start of next year? All this will be ready?
For sure, for next year, but we can get that to you. I don't want to misquote. So
Yeah,
let me
I was just
talk with Nick
curious.
about but the goal is to get it ordered so we can get in the
Have it ready to
hopper
go
to
for-
kind of get it going. I think they'd like to have some of it as soon as, like, to even play around with it this year, but to really have it ready and up and running for next year, for sure.
I had a couple of questions on the science technology piece of it. With the mention of the textbooks that are going to be electronic going forward, Has the district recently considered whether we want to be a one-to-one district offering every student a Chromebook? I know we've looked at that in the past and decided against it, but are we changing our position anytime soon?
So I won't formally say anything that we are doing because we have been discussing specifically at the high school about looking at that because we have, obviously we have a lot of Chromebooks and we're almost getting to the point of a one-to-one or at least one per classroom. So the question is, do we look at that and there's other components that we've been talking about. So Nick and I have been talking about it. We've been talking about a little bit with Tracy at the high school, just to start saying, is this something we need to explore? So I would say we're exploring the idea of if this would make better sense and how that might look for us, for our students. So I don't know, is that
Answers my
okay?
question,
Okay.
yeah. And I apologize, I probably should have asked the next question while everybody else was here, so if it needs to come back, I understand. But except for the anatomy tablets that I know come from a single source, the rest of the materials we're bidding through what source?
So the Chromebooks are done through REMC, so that's the bidding service. And then the microscopes, we have 3 bids that are there. So we've already secured those 3. So that's the group there. And then the Animatage, we have a sole source letter that accompanies the bid. So that's a sole provider.
Okay. For the board package, can we get the bids on the microscopes?
Absolutely.
Thank
You'll
you.
have all of them.
Okay.
All right. Oh, Mr. Conway.
On the technology side, could it be considered that we kind of have a trickle down and maybe not the volume, but to our middle schools and possibly even the grade schools, but where we would have the technology in the microscope, some of the bridge where they have a smaller classroom environment here, they could probably do 2 of those microscopes, right? I don't know what they need, but they certainly could use our other microscopes we have at the high school. And the stuff spread around so we don't just trash it. If we have, I would like to have some of the state-of-the-art stuff, but also our current stuff that's still very valid if the students don't have it. So I'd like to do an inventory where we're at in our labs and be it even in 5th and 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade, and make sure that we're servicing everybody because we can do it. There's no reason not to. So that would be my thought.
Any further discussion, questions regarding science technology? All right. Item B is the vocational equipment grant purchases, which we also reviewed earlier. Are there any additional questions or comments with respect to the vocational equipment grant purchases?
I think it's quite a privilege to even be considered to have that type of equipment at the high school.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's almost unbelievable. So it's
Yeah.
stand on the gas and see what we can build.
Yep, absolutely. All right, and then the next item, C, is board committee structure and meeting dates. At the next meeting, we will need to decide if we are going to dispense with any standing committees or ad hoc committees and go to just handling everything on a committee of the whole process, or if there are going to be any ad hoc / standing committees. Obviously, we're on the bond facilities. For example, we're at the tail end of what was the scope of the bond work. There's still some ongoing work that's it's going to be moving forward in the course of the next year. So it would seem to me that that there's a lot of information that's covered during those bond and facility committee meetings. So I think at a minimum, that's certainly one that should consider going forward. So those are the topics that we're going to need to discuss at the next meeting and make a decision. And then obviously, if we are going to have committee of the whole meetings, we will need to schedule set some dates because it will be really more in the form of obviously a full board meeting, for the rest of the year.
If I could, because I think it might be valuable for us to open some of that discussion here, so we're not,
Sure.
so we're able to make some more decisions when we get together next time. I've been on the board for a while. Some of you guys have too, and we've tried this a couple of different ways. And it feels like we're always looking for the right balance between committee of the whole and working committees. I know last year when we were talking about this, I advocated pretty strongly for the committee structure that we used. And there were some things about it that I think worked really well. There are other things about it that I think we're still not executing very well. So I would like to throw out there that perhaps we consider moving back to more committee of the whole meetings. I know it's not practical for us to do everything that way. Even though we are at the tail end of the bond, I think there's still bond committee work to do. And some of our board members, like Mr. Trombley, have particular expertise there that I think we get a lot of value out of at that bond committee meeting. But I'm not sure that we need all of the other things. I mean, if we think about the policy committee work, a lot of the discussions that we tried to have there, we ended up needing to have here as well. So I'm not sure that we did a whole lot for you by having those policy committee meetings, other than reviewing the Troon package. And I mean, that could be an ad hoc committee just once or twice a year when that package comes in rather than a standing committee. And I know the finance committee did a lot of good work on a lot of different topics and brought issues to the board that we needed to vote on. But I do almost feel like a lot of those discussions are things that we probably all needed to have at the board table too. Because that's, figuring out where we're going to spend our money is a key part of all of our obligations. So I would just like to throw out there, maybe think about whether we need standing committees beyond the bond committee and the executive committee that's in our bylaws at the moment. And, could we just spend extra time together on Monday nights and get some other work done together?
I sat through 4 years of my first 4 years here for committee of the wholes. And that's why we changed the structure.
I know.
Just saying.
I've done both too, and I keep changing my mind on which one works better. So I'm clearly
I
not.
agree with your statement. I'm not so sure either one of them works.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think there are advantages and disadvantages having not had committee of the whole, because only being here 1 year. One thing I do really like about the committee structure is the formality. I like having an agenda and minutes on specific topics. I think committee of the whole could just go crazy or lose focus. So it does allow us to direct energy in one way or the other. And the other thing that I liked about the committees, and at both policy and the academic, we had people attend those that are in the district, and they had opportunity to hear very specifically in areas. I felt like it provided another means of transparency and another opportunity for them to voice opinions in areas that they were really interested in a more conversational format. 3 minutes up here with no response is tough. I think it's really hard with Open Meetings Act rules, which we all are very aware of. It's hard to have conversations with the board members, maybe individually, but you rarely can talk to more than one, and certainly not about an area. For instance, academics. We had several parents that came and were really passionate about what they wanted to say, and I felt like it was a really fruitful discussion in those meetings. I know we had a couple people attend policy. I do agree with you that we then also frequently ended up rehashing things. The other concern I have with the standing committees is being aware of administration's time and attending. I don't think we want to over meeting anyone, ourselves or central administration, where they're just showing up in meetings and writing minutes. So I'm not sure what the right balance is, but I did and do like that connection that the committees offered on specific topics. And I do think it allows us to continue momentum in certain areas. I'm not sure how that would work in committee of the whole, but we've only done committees since I've been on the board, so I don't really know.
Mr. Conley?
I would echo that. She speaks very well, Ms. Marks, and that's a fact. And it worked in the finance committee the same way, where we had a group of our, in Dr. Outlaw's defense of this and support both, is that he said, geez, if I would have known that was the situation, we could have worked this a little bit. And it did bring that to light, where he was able to work through some things for our district on a very positive level, I think. So there is a balance. And I think that used correctly, I think the committee structure works. And we're able to bring some stuff forward that were needs of the students and the district that may have not have been, picked up in another fashion. So it may have opened some doors. So I think it's I don't know that I want to be on the committees, all of them, but I can tell you that, it's a lot of time. And
Correct.
even work and coming and doing the committee, just like you're saying, bringing up, administration's time. They got plenty to do besides the committees, but I think if working, maybe Roger, you with administration to see which committees are the strongest, we can always add another one if we're missing one, if there's some that need to be done, and then we split it up and, some of us may not be able to do committees this year, and others can. We'll have to see and how many we have. So I would just say that there's some benefit to them, I think, as a person that's been around a few years in the school board business. I think we did better with the committees than and I think Ms. Marks brought it perfectly, that how many people could come and sit in front of an open session and be able to talk about the things they need to talk about like they did in the committee structure. I'd leave it with that.
Can you provide any commentary on the executive committee and how you intend to, handle that part of it, Roger?
Well, the executive committee is required under our policy. So that committee will still exist because it's part of the process of setting agendas. It's really more of a question of the other topic specific committee structure, whether it's policy, whether it's bond/facilities, whether it's academic. That's really, that's, so even when we've had, since I've been on the board, even when we were in a committee of the whole structure, there still was an executive committee.
Yeah, I guess I'm specifically wondering if you could just clarify your intent working with the executive committee. Is it you meeting with superintendent on a specific day, like just for clarity?
Well, we have held our executive committee meetings the Tuesday before the Monday meetings for purposes of discussing and setting the agenda. That's when we have our standing executive committee meetings.
So 6 days prior.
Correct.
Okay. And so the agenda for our collective benefit then, is your preference that the agenda is set before that session, or is there a particular, is it the Thursday before the meeting when STAR's sent? Like what's the, just so we have guidance?
Obviously, if we're going to be discussing the setting of the agenda on the Tuesday before the Monday meeting, if there's any, request, and, previously when we had the committee of the standing committees, if there was a request for an item to be placed on the agenda from that committee, that would be conveyed by the committee chair to me or Dr. Outlaw, and then that would be added into the discussion of the executive committee. If we end up doing a committee of the whole, which we didn't do last year, then, the committee of the whole meeting, if it's on a Monday night, obviously the upshot of that meeting is gonna, in terms of an agenda, is not gonna be for another couple of weeks. If we as a committee of the whole decide we want to put something on an agenda for future action. So it just depends. It's going to depend on how we land, in terms of this process.
We'll obviously get into a lot more detailed discussion next week, but one thing that I was wondering, and again, something for the board to think about, would it be possible for us to get the detail specific to for future action items, when the items added to for future action on the agenda, and then have the packet be lighter when we have it for action? So like as an example tonight, I think it'd be super helpful if we saw the detail related to those purchases when the item's on for future action, and then we go into the meeting for action to have a more substantive discussion. And so just something to share with the team.
I agree. I'm sure there are going to be situations like with a budget amendment where they're working.
Yeah.
And it may not be ready yet for future action fully, at least, excuse me. But yeah, tonight the work was already done, so it would have been nice to have that in the packet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Anything further this evening regarding the committee structure for discussion next? All right.
So Roger, just real quick, at the beginning of the meeting, you asked me to hold off for adding something for future action. Would you like me to bring it up now or at the end of the meeting?
Well, we are at the end of the meeting.
Okay, so, right. So this is facilities related. I shared a picture with the team. Hopefully this will be quick. I had mentioned last year, and I don't remember, I think it was this time of year because my daughter and sons were going to Hawkins for their weekend basketball. For those that have children that play basketball in the weekend rec leagues or soccer leagues at Hawkins, there's the main fire exit off of the main hallway that goes into the gym. And this past weekend, when I was walking down the hall, I happened to look out the doors. And last year, that fire exit was severely obstructed. And I reached out to Dr. Outlaw, and he was kind enough to follow through on making some changes and implementing corrective action to open up that fire exit for students. This past weekend, when I went through and happened to look, there's a screen falling off of the window. There's a grill cover on the ground covered in snow. And it was kind of in a haphazard state again. And so I was just going to request, and I'll make a formal motion if needed, but I'm hoping we can just, through this discussion, add it to the for future portion of next meeting's agenda to revisit the subject of having our facilities team conduct assessments, regular assessments, and Dr. Outlaw can coordinate with facilities what the right frequency is. But the thought was to eliminate the noise that's created when there's a facilities related issue. I shared the picture of the bathroom, the restroom, boys' restroom in Hawkins has ceiling paint peeling off of it. Have the facilities team come in and provide a brief update similar to what was done tonight of assessments they conduct at periodic intervals throughout the year of different facilities in our district, and ultimately allow us as a board to have open dialogue with the facilities team and also support their efforts to make our facilities safer and cleaner and better for not only the students, but also members of our community, especially elderly people who are going inside and outside, in and out of the buildings during the full week. I had received a letter, I won't read the whole letter, from a parent today, Horning, and regarding the exterior of the building for those that have students there. Walkways that the drainage, the downspouts drain out onto sidewalks and it creates puddles and mud. And I think this fits very, very well also into the scope of those types of assessments. Parties walk around district buildings and they assess, they have a checklist and assess interior and exterior and make recommendations that are brought forward, shared with the board, and then we ultimately, our confidence continues to increase, public's confidence increases, and at the end of the day, their experience interfacing with our facilities improves with each successive audit that's conducted. So I guess to wrap this, my request is to add that for future action, a discussion for future action on our next board meeting's agenda. And if it requires a motion, I'd be happy to, make a motion.
The request is all.
Okay, thank you. One related item is the ventilate. I made a note, I forgot to mention it. Spoke to a few teachers this past week, and hoods and ventilation systems in a lot of our science classrooms are not working properly. So again, not a criticism. Whomever is responsible for going into our science classrooms, into our science labs, and making sure the ventilation and hoods work properly, that's something that I think should be included, because I personally have received feedback from science teachers who've requested help seeing that gets done.
Andy, what part of the ventilation isn't working? Do you know? What are they complaining of?
When they do experiments, for example, in chemistry, the exhaust that happens when experiments are conducted are not getting ultimately
So the
exhausted.
fans aren't working?
Correct.
Okay.
I would encourage that whoever the teacher is to communicate with administration to make sure that they know what the challenge is. So they should make sure that they do that.
Super.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I would recommend too.
All right. That concludes everything on our agenda for this evening. Our next meeting is Monday, February 12th at 7 o'clock, and this meeting is adjourned.
I'm gonna do 9:14.
Yeah. Second through. Come on.
There you go, Bob.
Hey, good